Formal explanations are used to explain properties by referencing the kind of thing something is. For example, the statement, "that flies because it is a bird." These types of explanations are one of the four types of explanations identified by Aristotle, with the others consisting of the material, efficient, and final explanation. Further, formal explanations are intrinsic to kind representation within common sense conception. Previous research of formal explanations has led others to ask, are formal explanations really explanations at all? One interpretation is that formal explanations function as pointers to explanatory knowledge that is exclusively held by a linguistic community. This suggests that formal explanations themselves are uninformative, and that the surrounding linguistic community possesses the needed explanatory knowledge that allows formal explanations to be a valid explanation at all. Another interpretation is that formal explanations function as a placeholder for inherent or causal explanations. This interpretation describes formal explanations itself as uninformative, but elicits a pragmatic process that helps formulate inherent explanations. Our interpretation of formal explanation differs from previous research, as we believe that formal explanations in themselves are informative, explanatory, and a distinct form of explanation. In order to test our hypothesis, we conducted 4 experiments. The first of those experiments, we asked if formal explanations are informative. In order to test this, we presented participants with a question such as, "Why is that," pointing at a carrot, "crunchy?" and then presented them with one of 3 different response forms. Formal, that is crunchy because it is a carrot. Inherent, that is crunchy because of deeper internal features. And tautologous, that is crunchy because it is crunchy. And then we asked them to rate on a 1 to 7 scale how satisfying they interpreted the response that was given to them. The formal explanations were judged to be significantly more satisfactory than the tautologous explanations, showing that they were in fact informative. The second experiment was nearly identical in design to experiment 1, but instead of asking how satisfying, we asked how natural they perceived each explanation to be in response to the given question. Experiment 2 showed that formal explanations were also more natural than tautologous explanations. Experiment 3 was used to test whether formal explanations really explain or are mere placeholders. We tested if a given formal explanation differed in its ability to explain the presence and absence of a critical property. For this experiment, we presented the presence questions as the same as previous experiments, but the absence questions were worded like, "Why is that," pointing at a carrot, "not crunchy?" Also, similar to experiment 2, we used the naturalness as a rating factor for this experiment. Inherent explanations were also included as a control. This experiment resulted in formal explanations being better for explaining the presence of a property than its absence, suggesting that they are explanatory, not mere placeholders. Experiment 4 explored if participants perceived formal explanations as a distinct form of explanation. With this experiment, there were 2 possible interpretations that the subjects could have had. One, that they would interpret formal explanations as a more general form of inherent explanations, and possibility 2, they would interpret the 2 explanation forms as distinct forms of explanation altogether. For this experiment, we had 2 conditions that were presented, one with pairs of formal and inherent explanations, and pairs in which an explanation was formal and one was inherent. Participants indicated which explanation was more general, specific, or if they were different types of explanation altogether. As predicted, participants picked a different type of explanation option more in the different condition than in the same condition. With these experiments, we concluded that formal explanations are informative as they were more satisfactory and natural than tautologies. We also conclude that they are explanatory as they do not explain the presence and absence of critical properties equally as well, as predicted if they were mere placeholders. And finally, formal explanations are a distinct form of explanation from inherent explanation altogether.